to another episode of Misunderstood Movies, the show where I take a look at movies that have, for some reason or another, have been branded as bad, but are actually very good if you look really closely at them. I'm your host, Alex Consalvos, aka Velociraptor for You. 1992 was a big year for animated films, with Disney's Aladdin coming in as the reigning heavyweight champion critically and financially. But there were many other animated gems that came out that year that, if not for the internet, would have faded into obscurity. Today, I'm going to talk about one of these animated films from that year. It's actually a film that combines animation with live action, similar to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but this movie has a very different, much more adult tone to it. I'm talking about, of course, Cool World. Cool World. Ask anyone about this film, and they'll automatically tell you that it's a bad movie. But is it really? Well, that's what I'm here to find out. But before I delve deeper into the movie, first, I'm going to give you some history about the director behind it, Ralph Bakshi. He is a legendary artist, film director and producer, and most of all, animator, who's responsible for bringing animation aimed at adults into existence. Ralph Bakshi was born in Haifa, Palestine on October 29, 1938. In 1939, Ralph and his family emigrated from Palestine over to New York City, where he grew up in the Brooklyn neighborhood of Brownsville. His fascination with the urban milieu that he experienced firsthand in Brownsville fueled Ralph's emerging artistic talent and would also pave the way for the kind of stories that he would tell in his films down the road. As a kid, he enjoyed comic books, and his love for them led him to discovering a book called The Complete Guide to Cartooning by Gene Burns. Upon discovering the book, Ralph took up cartooning as a way to document his life experiences, and also to fuel his fascination with the fantasy genre. At the age of 15, Ralph attended Thomas Jefferson High School in East Brooklyn, but grew disinterested in academics. So, after a falling out with the school's principal, Ralph went on to attend Manhattan's School of Industrial Art, now called the High School of Art and Design. He graduated from there in June 1956 with an award in cartooning. At the age of 18, Ralph and his closest friend Cosmo Ancelotti took positions at Terrytoons. That would be Terrytoons of Mighty Mouse and Heckle and Jekyll fame. This is where Ralph got his start in the animation industry. In the beginning, he was an animation cell polisher, but he eventually moved up to cell inker, then to creating design tests, and eventually animation director when he created the superhero parody series The Mighty Heroes in 1966. During his tenure at Terrytoons, Ralph refined and perfected his animation technique. Around 1965, after becoming dissatisfied with how his position as creative director on The Mighty Heroes was turning out, Ralph decided to leave Terrytoons to form his own animation company. He got the chance to be the head of an animation studio in 1967, specifically as head of animation at Paramount Pictures Cartoon Studios, where he produced, directed, wrote, and designed 4 short animated films there, before Paramount closed its animation division after Ralph served there for only 8 months. After Paramount, Ralph met producer Steve Krantz, and this led to Ralph founding his own animation studio called Bakshi Productions in the Garment District of Manhattan. 2 animated series that the new studio produced there were Rocket Robin Hood and the famous 1960s Spider-Man series. Bakshi Productions also formed its own division called Ralph Spot, which produced commercials for Coca-Cola and a series of educational shorts for Encyclopedia Britannica called Max the 2,000-Year-Old Mouse. However, at this point in Ralph's career, he grew tired of the kind of animation that the studio was producing. and he realized that the field of animation targeted at adults was almost completely non-existent. So, Ralph decided to produce a full-length animated film, something not only personal, but something that would prove his point that animation can be for an adult audience and not just strictly for kids and families. In 1972, and after a long and troubled production, Ralph Bakshi and Steve Krantz released Ralph's directorial debut film, Fritz the Cat, an animated adaptation of Robert Crumbs's underground comic strip of the same name. Filled with sharp satire, very strong social, political, and racial issues, and giving audiences a visceral look at real life in 1960s New York, Fritz the Cat was 100% aimed at adults, with its raunchy sexual situations, hardcore violence, and drug use. Due to its content, the film became the first independent animated film to receive an X rating. Despite the rating, Fritz the Cat was a smash hit, earning positive praise from critics and audiences and taking in a worldwide box office gross of $100 million.
Fritz the Cat. He's coming your way at this cinema.
A sequel was produced called The 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat, but without Ralph's involvement and to much less positive feedback. Ralph instead decided to follow up Fritz the Cat with
Heavy Traffic,
a film that heavily draws upon a lot of Ralph's own personal experiences in New York. Using pinball imagery as a metaphor, it's the story of a young cartoonist named Michael Corleone, exploring his inner-city life in New York in various surrealistic fantasies. Heavy Traffic is regarded as Ralph's biggest critical success, and it's also the first film of his to combine live action and animation together. Ralph would once again blend the two mediums together for his 1975 film, Coonskin, which is his personal take on the folktales of Uncle Remus. This film is regarded as his most controversial film ever, telling a story about 3 African-American brothers, a rabbit, a bear, and a fox, who rise to the top of organized crime in Harlem, encountering corrupt law enforcement, the mafia, and con artists along the way. Coonskin was based upon Ralph's own personal experiences with racism, and he made it to be a direct attack on the racist stereotypes of African Americans and the prejudices against them by whites, which is the main reason why it was very controversial upon its release. Although initial reviews were negative, Coonskin has since been reappraised, and Ralph himself considers it to be his best film. Wizards, released in 1977, was Ralph's first epic fantasy film. Set in a post-apocalyptic Earth millions of years in the future, Wizards tells the story of 2 wizard brothers, one good and the other evil, locked in a classic and impactful battle between good and evil. The film is not only Ralph's first fantasy film, but also his first truly family-oriented film to date. For its epic battle sequences, Ralph employed the technique of rotoscoping, an animation technique involving tracing over live-action footage frame by frame. Rotoscoping, along with a little bit of cell animation, was used in Ralph's next big fantasy epic, J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, which is the first ever film adaptation of the world-famous story of Middle-earth. Ralph's film combines the Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers books into a single narrative. Even though it received mixed reviews from critics, and though Ralph never adapted The Return of the King into a film, his Lord of the Rings is to this day praised by fans, and it inspired Peter Jackson to undertake and produce his live-action Lord of the Rings film trilogy. After his foray into fantasy filmmaking, Ralph once again produced a film that was on a more personal level for him with 1981's American Pop, an animated musical drama tale, once again primarily using rotoscope, that follows 4 generations of a Russian Jewish immigrant family of musicians and how their lives and careers parallel the history of American pop music. In 1982, Ralph finally completed and released a project that he had actually been working on since the mid-70s, a film called
Hey, good looking.
It's a story about teenage life in 1950s Brooklyn, focusing on Vinny, leader of a street gang called the Stompers, his nutty best friend Crazy Shapiro, and their respective girlfriends Rosie and Eva. After Hey Good Lookin' came Fire and Ice in 1983. This was Ralph's prehistoric-themed adventure fantasy epic that was the 3rd film of his to use rotoscope, and it was a collaboration between him and famed fantasy artist Frank Frazetta.
Fire and Ice, from the visual imagination of Ralph Bakshi and the dazzling artistry of Frank Frazetta.
After Fire and Ice, Ralph temporarily retired from animated filmmaking and moved on to painting. During this time, he completed the screenplay to a purely live-action film that he began working on during the 60s titled If I Catch Her, I'll Kill Her. This screenplay would later become Ralph's 1994 live-action TV drama film The Cool and the Crazy. In 1985, Ralph was requested by the manager of the Rolling Stones to direct a live-action/animated music video for the band's cover of the song Harlem Shuffle. Ralph directed the live-action sequences, and under his supervision, the animation was directed by animator John Kay, who would go on to produce the offbeat animated comedy series Ren and Stimpy. But that would have to wait for John Kay, because after meeting Ralph on the Harlem Shuffle project, he decided to join Ralph in 1987 in getting a brand new Mighty Mouse series produced for CBS. The resulting show, titled Mighty Mouse The New Adventures, premiered on September 19, 1987 to favorable reviews from critics and TV viewers alike. The witty, satirical, and wildly imaginative show is actually credited for inciting a creator-driven revolution in American TV animation during the late 80s and into the 90s, and it served as a springboard for other famous animators such as Bruce Timm of Batman the Animated Series. However, Mighty Mouse The New Adventures was cancelled following a very controversial episode that many parents claimed depicted cocaine use when in reality the opposite was true and not the allegations made by the parents and the American Family Association. After the show was cancelled on October 22, 1988, Ralph went on to create and direct an animated TV special for Nickelodeon called Christmas in Tattertown. He also directed a half-hour live-action film called This Ain't Bebop for PBS's Imagining America anthology series, and then an animated adaptation of Dr. Seuss's The Butter Battle book for TNT. During this time in Ralph's career, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was released in theaters in 1988 to huge critical acclaim and becoming the highest-grossing film of that year. It's credited for revitalizing the American animation industry through its revolutionary and groundbreaking techniques that it employed to combine traditional animation with live action. After Roger Rabbit's success, studios' interest in animation was renewed, and coincidentally, Ralph Bakshi decided to make another film. He created a story and wrote a screenplay in 1990 titled Cool World, and he successfully pitched it to Paramount Pictures as a horror film that combined live action with animation. Ralph's original story concept for Cool World involved a human cartoonist man and a cartoon woman having sex, and in the process, the animated woman would conceive a hybrid child, half cartoon, half human. This child would grow into an adult resenting his human father for abandoning him years before, and he would proceed to travel to the real world to track down his human father and try to kill him. This truly is a, dare I say it, one heck of a cool story. But unfortunately, this story would not be the one used for the film. What happened was the project's producer, Frank Mancuso Jr., son of then Paramount president Frank Mancuso Sr., had Ralph's script rewritten in secret behind Ralph's back without his knowledge, hiring screenwriters Michael Grace, Mark Victor, and an uncredited Larry Gross to rewrite the script. In hindsight, that was an extremely stupid move on Mancuso Jr.'s part, because when Ralph was handed the new script and seeing that it was barely the same, him and the producer got in a fight. Once Mancuso Sr. got wind of the incident, he threatened to sue Ralph if he didn't complete the film. It turns out that Paramount became hesitant about the kind of reaction a live-action/animated horror film would get from audiences, and the consequences that could spell for the studio. So they decided to have Mancuso Jr. scrap Ralph's hard R-rated horror concept in favor of a PG-13 rated comedy in order to attract a much wider audience. So Ralph really didn't have anywhere to go, and with his concept for Cool World scrapped, he was left trying to reassemble the broken pieces, so to speak, into something. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. It's time to talk about the end result that was released on July 10th, 1992.
Place should be erased.
Hey, it's a living.
Cool world.
We may not be real to you as yet, but we will be.
Cool World begins in 1945 in Las Vegas, Nevada, at the end of World War II. A returning soldier named Frank Harris, played by Brad Pitt, is happily welcomed home by his mother, played by Janie Bren Lowen, and the two are soon going for a motorcycle ride together through the Nevada desert. Unfortunately, Frank's homecoming happiness is tragically cut short when he and his mother get in a car crash with a drunk couple that takes the life of Frank's beloved mother. But suddenly, in a flash of light, Frank is teleported to Cool World, an animated alternate dimension inhabited by living, breathing cartoon characters known as doodles. A portal has been opened between Cool World and the real world, thanks to a doodle scientist named Dr. Vincent Whiskers, voiced by Maurice LaMarche, and his use of a mysterious trans-dimensional object called the Spike of Power, a powerful Cool World artifact that is the only thing keeping both worlds separated from each other. Due to the tragic loss of his mother and his wartime experiences combined, Frank decides to remain in Cool World, while Doc Whiskers travels to the real world, making Frank the first ever Noid, which is Cool World slang for real people, to call the animated dimension home. Fast forward to 1992 Las Vegas, and we meet Jack DEEBS, played by Gabriel Byrne. Jack is an imprisoned cartoonist that's just now getting out of prison after 10 long years. Why was he imprisoned? Well...
Hey, Deebs, why don't you do a book on that guy you murdered? You know, that guy you found in bed with your wife?
Yeah, that's why. But during his time in the Slammer, Jack has used his cartoonist skills to create a highly acclaimed comic book series based on, ironically enough, Cool World. What happened is that Jack has been repeatedly teleported into Cool World and has been misled into thinking that he's dreaming. He finds out later, of course, that Cool World and all of its wildly zany doodle inhabitants are all very real. But this is how he was able to create his comic series based on his experiences there. The individual doodle that's responsible for all of this is a drop-dead gorgeous doodle blonde bombshell named Holly Wood, voiced and played by Kim Basinger. Holly's main goal is to leave Cool World behind forever and become a Noid woman. The only way Holly can become flesh and blood is if she has sex with a Noid, and she chooses Jack because he is the creator of the comic based on her and her world. However, Frank Harris, who is now a hard-boiled cop in Cool World, confronts Jack and warns him of one of the oldest laws there.
Noids do not have sex with doodles. Right? Noids do not have sex with doodles.
Despite Frank's warnings, Holly manages to successfully seduce and make love to Jack, which turns her into a real human, and the two of them return to the real world, but not before the now real Holly uses a fountain pen to eliminate Frank's nutty doodle partner, Nails the Spider, voiced by Charles Adler. While in Las Vegas, Holly and Jack begin flickering in between Noid and Doodle states, their sexual relationship having fractured the interdimensional balance of both worlds. When a skeptical and freaked out Jack says nay to Holly's idea to find a doodle called Vegas Vinny, aka Doc Whiskers, and the Spike of Power as a solution to their problem, a pissed off Holly kicks him out of his car and goes off on her own. When Frank himself returns to the real world, he and Jack team up to stop Holly from removing the spike. In the frantic chase that follows, Holly kills Frank, removes the spike, and causes all doodle hell to break loose in Las Vegas. By the way, Jack is turned into an annoyingly uptight superhero doodle because of this. In the end, Super Jack stops Holly by putting the spike back in its place, trapping himself, Holly, and all the doodles that have passed over back into Cool World. Frank actually receives a happy ending by being reborn as a doodle, allowing him to finally pursue a relationship with another lovely doodle girl named Lynette, voiced by Candy Milo, while Jack and Holly are stuck together, possibly forever, much to Holly's dismay, with Super Jack planning to marry her. And that is Cool World for you, folks.
Bye-bye, folks. Have a nice life.
Now, after walking out of theaters on the film's opening day, most people generally reacted to it with a big, fat
"Holy crap, was that stupid!"
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up in a nutshell. Cool World was near universally panned by critics and audiences alike, and this led to the film becoming a box office bomb as well, grossing only $14.1 million. Personally, the main problem that I have with Cool World is that it has a huge lack of explanation. What I mean by that is that there's very little, if any, explanation for all of the events that take place over the course of the film, resulting in a story that's really wafer thin. For example, we're first introduced to the Spike of Power in the prologue, but despite being briefly brought up again after that, it's not mentioned again until towards the climax, and there's never any dialogue that really elaborates on it as far as what it's really capable of as a powerful artifact. It's also never explained how exactly sex between a Noid and a Doodle can rupture the interdimensional fabric between Cool World and the real world. The whole mechanics of this particular situation alone are completely missing. The same thing goes with how exactly are pens lethal to doodles as well. This is what I feel is primarily wrong with Cool World. This lack of explanation gives you, the viewer, a big mental workout trying to fill in the blanks. When you watch a movie, you want the plot and the story to be full, complete, and for it to make sense. This isn't the case with Cool World, because even though the overall concept of the film is pretty good, the way the script executes this concept in the plot is very weak. And that's why the story can be difficult to understand the first time you see it, and even after repeated viewings. This lack of explanation also results in a huge lack of character development for both the main and supporting characters. The backstories of most of them are either partially developed, touched upon if you will, or just never explained at all, which is another big disappointment because you end up not being engaged with the characters and hardly liking any of them. A prime example of this is Gabriel Byrne's character of Jack DEEBS. We know why he was sent to prison, but that alone is never explained in full to us. There's no flashback sequence or something to show not only that, but also how Hollywood found out about him and started bringing him into Cool World, which would lead to his cartoonist abilities coming out in his Cool World comics. Because of that, there's really almost no reason for Jack to be in the movie at all. Now, out of all the characters, Brad Pitt's Frank Harris is the only one who's developed enough to where you are engaged in his story, his struggles, and his relationships with the other characters, because from beginning to end, the movie devotes more time to flesh him out as a character out of all the others. For one of Brad Pitt's early roles, he actually does a nice job playing this man who's in a world of living cartoon characters and how he adapts to his predicament and carves his own path for himself. Since Frank Harris is one of the few engaging characters in the film, it's actually a relief when after he's killed by Holly, he comes back to life as a doodle himself, much to the delight of Lynette and Nails. The only problem with this ending is that it's quite literally brought up out of the blue with zero background to it and no prior information about it at all. It's a happy ending, yes, but it's just slapped on there, and it makes you think, where did that come from? Why weren't we told about this before? Because it raises those questions, Cool World's ending really leaves an awkward impact on the viewer. Now, about Kim Basinger as Holly Wood, I'll get to the positive points about her performance soon, but first I want to bring up the negative points of it. Of course, I'm talking about Kim's performance as the Noid Holli. Kim Basinger herself has usually played good parts and has done a very good job of it, with one of my personal favorite roles of hers being Vicky Vale in Tim Burton's Batman. But as Holly Wood after she becomes real? Not so much. I mean, have a look for yourself.
This is me.
This is Holly. Holly's
Hello.
my friend.
Hi. This is Jack. Nice neighbors. I'm real.
Yeah, you sure are, honey.
So many men. They're real. Smell them.
Holly, you're with me, remember? You know, you can't go out smelling people. So, what do you want to drink?
Oh, anything they have.
You know, they got 95 different things, Holly.
Oh, 95?
Uh-huh.
I'll have one of each.
That's just bad. Words almost can't even describe how truly atrocious Kim's acting is here. I believe she was trying to portray exactly how an animated being that's become real would respond to being in the real world, and if that's the case here, then Kim is portraying this the wrong way. But still, even though Kim's real Holly performance really drags down the film's whole second act, it actually causes you to laugh along with it. And that's the best way to describe Kim's acting here. It's so bad that it's funny. By the way, Ralph Bakshi never wanted Kim to be in the film at all. He actually wanted Drew Barrymore to play Holly, but had to go with Kim in order to keep Brad Pitt, who was going to play Jack DEEBS initially, and because Kim was a bigger box office draw at the time. Kim herself also tried to do yet another rewrite to the script so that the film could end up being something that she could show in hospitals to sick children. I'm not kidding. She actually tried to do that. Just be thankful that she didn't. Two other final flaws with Cool World that I want to discuss concerns the animation and about how the film actually had to have the exact same level of live action on animation interaction as Roger Rabbit. On one hand, the animation is pretty well executed because it's by animators who do know their craft and are under the direction of a man who's a genius in the field. All of the main Doodle characters, from Holly and Lynette to Nails and Doc Whiskers, are drawn and animated pretty smoothly and to a nice result. The same thing goes for all of the background Doodle characters as well, and all of the cartoon humor coming from them is primarily reminiscent of classic cartoon humor, such as what you see in old Terrytoons and Tex Avery cartoons, which Ralph Bakshi dubs as a cornball style of humor. But the background Doodles and how they were animated ultimately becomes another downfall of the film, because for one thing, the antics of these exact characters occur in a lot of key scenes between the main characters, and it becomes quite distracting from what's really supposed to be going on. An example of this is during the sex scene, which repeatedly cuts to Holly's friends, the Goons, attempting to sneak a peek at her and Jack doing it. And mostly, the only thing these residents of Cool World do throughout the film is just engage in random cartoon violence over and over and over again. That's all they ever do. They are completely insane.
I want you to tear and rip their miserable faces inside out until their mother doesn't recognize them. Pretty please.
So why is the background animation like this? Well, it's because the animators themselves were never given the screenplay, and were told by Ralph to basically do a scene that's funny, whatever you want to do. So yeah, that's why. Now for the interaction. Now you're probably thinking, well, Ralph Bakshi had animation and live action together in some of his previous films. Yes, he did. But the difference there is that in films such as Heavy Traffic and Coonskin, even though there were some scenes where animated characters and real actors would share together, they really weren't supposed to be engaging in Roger Rabbit-style interaction with each other. Cool World is supposed to be where the animated characters and live actors are supposed to be interacting with each other a la Roger Rabbit, but those moments of interaction are very few and far between here. Most of the time, you can tell that Brad, Gabriel, and Kim are just staring off into space and are trying to do their best to pretend to be talking to a doodle, but to very little avail that makes the doodle on Noid interaction pretty unconvincing. Now listen. By talking about the film's many flaws and problems, I'm honestly not trying to jump on the bandwagon and hate on this movie like everyone else. No. Despite all that I've talked about, I, for one, am one of the few people who happens to truly love and enjoy Cool World just for what it is. In my honest opinion, it may not be a great movie or a masterpiece, but it's really not a terrible movie either. It's not as bad as others make it out to be, because if you look very closely at it, you'll discover that it truly does have redeeming qualities to it that actually save it from being a total bust and make it quite entertaining to watch. Since I've already talked about what makes the overall animation itself pretty good, here are some other positives of Cool World that I want to talk about. First, supporting Doodle characters such as Lynette, Nails, and Doc Whiskers are engaging in the fact that like Frank and Jack, they too are protagonists who are on the latter's sides 100%, and so you like to root for them to help the main heroes accomplish what's right. There's also Holly Wood herself. What more can I say about her? Just look at her. She is...
I want a diamond ring, I want some bracelets and everything. Daddy, you better get the best for me. Hey, Daddy. When I look...
Next to Jessica Rabbit and Red Hot Riding Hood, Holly Wood is by far another one of the sexiest animated chicks to ever grace the silver screen. Her alluring design is reminiscent of the great Marilyn Monroe, whom Holly herself idolizes in the film. Kim Basinger, for someone with no prior voice acting experience, actually does an impressive job as the Doodle Holly, giving her a seductive, cooing voice to round her out very nicely.
I got news for you, baby. I'm made of ink, but I'm no dream.
Holly is ambitious, sexy, and somewhat friendly. That's the thing about Holly, how uncertain you are about her when you first meet her. At first, she comes across as like a hopeless dreamer, and it almost looks like Frank is going to be the bad guy because he's standing in the way of Holly's goal. But after she consummates her desires with Jack, and after she sucks up poor Nails with a pen, her true colors begin to come out. And they really do so when she becomes obsessed with staying real forever in the second act, stopping at nothing and willing to resort to anything, even murder, just to accomplish her goal. That is why Holly Wood herself is truly, dare I say it, cool as the femme fatale of Cool World. Next to Kim Basinger as Doodle Holly, the other members of the voice cast do an impressive job of voicing their respective characters, from Maurice LaMarche as Doc Whiskers and Superjack, Charles Adler as Nails, Joey Kamen as Slash the Goon, Candy Milo as both Lynette and Bob the Goon, to Michael David Lally as a very cool doodle criminal named Sparks, who carries carnivorous wooden nickels with him. Ouch! Another plus that the film has going for it is the design of the Cool World itself by the film's background designer Barry Jackson. The twisted, spiraling, animated city with out-of-place body parts in the buildings are incredibly designed and appear to draw inspiration from dark Gothic and German expressionist art styles, which gives the Cool World and the film itself a nice sort of film noirish atmosphere to it. One last plus that the movie has is that the music is awesome. Mark Isham's score is very well executed, and the songs on the soundtrack are pretty cool as well. Prime examples include David Bowie's Real Cool World and Sex on Wheels by My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult. Now, even though Cool World appears to be overshadowed due to other big-name films from 1992 such as Batman Returns, it was actually a big deal when it came out. It wasn't something that just went under the radar. Paramount's marketing campaign for Cool World not only included the usual trailers and TV spots, but also involved a 75-foot-tall likeness of Holly Wood herself being placed on top of the Hollywood sign. That actually didn't go over too well with Los Angeles residents, and after much complaining and picketing, the Holly likeness was taken down. However, Holly's likeness did appear on a special clock released as part of the film's promotion. There were also several video games based on the movie for home computers such as the Commodore 64 and for home consoles such as the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and Game Boy consoles. DC Comics released a 4-issue comic book prequel to the film and an official movie adaptation soon afterwards. I happen to own all 5 Cool World comics, and I can tell you right now that their respective storylines are in fact much better than that of the film. Now, because of the film's thin storyline, many plot holes, and lack of character development, and this might sound completely crazy, but I strongly believe that Cool World seriously deserves either a full-fledged remake or reboot. Why? Well, all that I've talked about and all of the film's flaws that I've elaborated on are as good an indicator as any to support my belief of Cool World being honestly worthy of a second chance. A remake or reboot can actually improve upon the mistakes of the original, fixing them so that the new version has an understandable and engaging plot without any holes, and characters that are fully defined so that you, the audience, can become emotionally invested in them so that you can cheer for the heroes and delight in seeing the villains get their just desserts. Another essential ingredient needed for a new Cool World is a level of interaction on the same level as that scene in Roger Rabbit, so that the audience really believes that the live actors and animated characters are really interacting with each other and are playing off of each other to a very believable level. As for the animation, it has to be 100% traditional hand-drawn animation. No CGI. I repeat, no CGI whatsoever. So those are very valid reasons as to why Cool World seriously needs a remake or a reboot. But until the day comes where something like that does happen, the original Cool World will forever remain a cult classic to film buffs, animation buffs, and fans of Ralph Bakshi. It's the kind of movie where you're supposed to, leave all known perceptions of reality behind and just let your brain be taken on a whacked out, trippy, crazy, and enjoyable journey. Cool World. What a wild ride. What a cool way to escape reality. Well, this about wraps up this episode of Misunderstood Movies. I hope you enjoyed watching, and until next time, this is Alex Consalvos, aka Velociraptor for You, signing off.
What a beautiful landscape. Let's see, we can put the house over here, the studio over here, I'll still draw, of course. We'll raise children over here, I'll fight crime over there. Oh, we're going to be deliriously happy, Honey Poo.
Pencil dick.